General Elections 2010, The Big Debate, with Damien McGinley.
Hello and welcome to this special election broadcast. Today we're focusing on North Antrim and we'll be getting the views from the candidates on the issues that affect you. We're broadcasting from our 7FM studios in Ballymena, and my thanks to the candidates for making time in their diaries, except Ian Paisley from the DUP, who unfortunately isn't here. He has been invited, I hasten to add. We've been talking to him about this for about 2 weeks now, and we even moved the debate back an hour to avoid a clash in his diary, but he hasn't turned up. He's not taken the opportunity to put his views to you, the listener, which is obviously up to him. But never mind that, because we have four of the other candidates here. Joining me for the debate, Jim Allister from Traditional Unionist Voiced, Erwin Armstrong from the Ulster Conservatives and Unionists, Dackie Mackay from Sinn Féin, and Declan O'Lone from the SDLP. Right, the first topic I'd like to cover today is the question of leadership. In the recent past, there's been very strong leadership in Northern Ireland, but many feel that is lacking at present. Jim Allister, many people believe leadership is about being brave, moving things forward, saying, I have an idea, this is right, follow me, I'll not let you down. And many say your approach is the opposite to that. Is that what leadership in this country really needs at the moment?
Well, I refute entirely that mine's a backward-looking policy. Mine, in fact, is the most democratic, forward-looking policy, because everyone else around this table are avid supporters of terrorism government. They are avid supporters of mandatory coalition, which says to every voter in Northern Ireland, you alone in the democratic world are not allowed to vote a party out of government, and you alone, apart from in North Korea, are not allowed to have an opposition in Stormont. And this week, when we transferred Policing and Justice, we arrived at that ludicrous situation where every party in Stormont is now in government. As I say, you have to go to North Korea to find another parliament without an opposition. Now, I'm saying that has to change. That is a foundation of sand, and that is why, of course, it is mired in dysfunctional, malfunctioning performances where the joint First Ministers, you talk about leadership, joint First Ministers, one can't even sign a letter without the other consenting, and we've gone through months and years of total deadlock because of this system. So my way forward is through voluntary coalition, where you have an election, no party's big enough on its own to form a government, those that then can agree the platform, whatever their identity is, a platform which can secure majority support in the Assembly, they govern. Those who can't are in the opposition. And that is the way democracy ought to work. That's the solid foundation, which then allows you to vote parties out of government, which gives you an opposition and gives you stability. All the things we are lacking in Northern Ireland. And of course, we're only at this situation because of the monstrous programme of mandatory coalition, which denies people those rights and which exists for one reason only, to keep terrorists in our government.
Okay, many people may agree with that in terms of democracy, but this is for many regarded as a stepping stone. Many people that would agree with what you're saying, but a stepping stone in terms of the process in Northern Ireland. It was too big a leap to go to what you're advocating or asking for now, that there had to be compromise on either side, and you're not compromising.
It's never too big a leap to democracy. And we're leaping in the opposite direction, where you cannot vote a party out of government and cannot have an opposition. Look, it comes down to this. We have constructed a system through the Belfast Agreement, which the DUP opposed and now operate, having stolen David Trimbow's clothes, which is really in existence in order to buy off the IRA, to guarantee them places in government. And if Sinn Féin are only Democrats so long as they're in government, then they're not Democrats at all. And if Sinn Féin cannot equally operate as opposition as in government, then it underscores that they're not Democrats. I can be a Democrat whether I'm an opposition politician or a governmental politician. So can two of the other people around this table. But there's one person around this table who is not prepared to do that, and who is prepared to sustain and support, as his party did for generations, a campaign of terrorism to try and bring down democracy.
We'll move on a second. Welcome back. You're listening to a special election broadcast on the North Antrim constituency. We're going to turn to other matters which are becoming increasingly familiar on our news bulletins. Attacks and threats from dissident Republicans.
I think the people who've carried on where the provisionals left off under a different flag of convenience are doing so with the knowledge that violence has paid in this country. They look at the Sinn Féin benches in Stormont. They look into our executive, our terrorist inclusive executive, where 3 convicted terrorists sit as members, and they see it pays, where someone who was such a deep-dyed terrorist that he bombed the Old Bailey has now got his meddling hands on issues affecting policing and justice. And they conclude that if it worked for the provisionals, it can work for them. And that is one of the follies of the Belfast Agreement, which was a buy-off and a payoff for terrorism, and has guaranteed terrorism in perpetuity because it creates and feeds that belief. Second point I want to make is that Sinn Féin know exactly who these bombers are. They trained them. They equipped them. They could deal with them. They choose not to, because Sinn Féin still is a double act. Well, the smiling boy, the smiling Martin McGuinness, and the useful leverage that the Republican dissidents, so-called, give them. And that's why during the policing and justice debate, we had the audacious claims, if you don't devolve policing and justice, you'll get more terrorism. The ill-concealed threat from the nasties of republicanism to benefit the now good guys, so-called, of republicanism, that double act. So they know who they are, they could deal with them, they are protecting them, and they're protecting them because they're of use to them. And that's the reality. And they need to be dealt with security-wise. Dealing with them politically didn't work in the past, won't work in the future. And whatever it takes needs to be done.
Okay, I suspect, gentlemen, we could do a whole programme on this topic, but I want to get some other questions in. We're going to do a quick fire round, if that's all right, to get your viewpoints on some of the other issues that are cropping up in this election debate. If I could ask you to keep your answers very brief, we're going to try and get through as many of these as we can. The first is immigration, which is very important to many of the industries here in North Antrim, not least the food processing and manufacturing sectors. Jim Allister, first of all, should there be a cap on immigration in the UK?
Yes, we have a difficulty within the EU. There's freedom of movement, and we were very foolish in 2004 to have an open door policy when we enlarged the EU. We're only 3 nations in the EU did that, and the rest kept up barriers for the 7 years that we're allowed to do it. And that's why all that immigration was funneled into Sweden, the Republic, and the UK. And yes, that has been destabilising in some ways, and has been helpful in some ways, but I think overall we've reached a saturation point that needs to be addressed in the next Parliament, and I think a cap is going to be necessary. I really do think that, yes, there are skills that we need in this country. And we need foreign people sometimes to provide those skills. But an open door, unhindered immigration policy, I think, has gone too far.